Hey, this is Jim over at From Scratch Farmstead, and if you're on a small farm like we are, the idea of getting large round bales of hay might be really intimidating, right? The small square bales are kind of the standard for small size farms. And so this past winter, we switched over to getting the large round bales of hay. So I'm going to share with you how we made that work on a small scale here. So when it comes to getting hay, there's three options generally, right? There's the small square bales, there's your round bales, and then there's the large square bales. And the beauty of the small square bales is that you can manage them by hand, right? You don't need any special big equipment, skid steers, tractors, anything like that. You can just pick those up, move them where you need to, stack them easily, feed them to your animals. They're great for small scale farms and properties, and that's what we had always used. But as you can see behind me here, this is a large round bale behind me. It's pretty small right now because it's towards the end of its life. It's probably like a quarter of the size as it was when we got it, or even less right now. There's probably only a few days left of feeding this to our cows before we would get a new one. But these things are pretty massive. They're like 5 or 6 feet wide in diameter, and so they are heavy. They take up quite a bit of space, and you definitely need some sort of skid steer tractor with forks or whatever to move these things around. And so that's why it seems like they shouldn't really be that practical for a small scale farm. But some of the benefits of them is that you get a lot better value and bang for your buck when you buy this large of a bale of hay versus the individual small square bales. And so the small square bales by us go for generally about $5 per bale. And then the large square ones, if you get like a nice the large round ones, if you get like a nice tightly packed one, high quality hay, they're generally $80 to $100 in costs. You can get them less if they're like not tightly packed, lesser quality, more grassy type hay. They're maybe like $65 to $80 in our area at least, but 80 to 100 is generally what we would pay for them. And so one of those big round bales generally lasts us, with our couple of cows that we have, anywhere from 15 to 20 days, just depending on the size and what the bale of hay is. So 15 to 20 days. And so that same cost for 15 to 20 days worth of the small square bales, we would generally go through like one and a half of those each day. So at $5 per bale, that's going to be like $7.50 per day. Over 20 days, let's say, that's $150 for the small square bales, where if we're paying $80 to $100 for a large bale for that, same amount of hay, same quantity, obviously we're going to have quite a bit of savings there. One of the other advantages of the round bales is just availability, right? In a lot of ways, it's easier for a farmer to bale up larger bales in fewer quantity versus having hundreds of small bales that they have to move around by hand. If they can have large bales that they can just move around with their equipment easier and quicker than the small bales, that's just more efficient all around for them. So you might just find in your area, it's easier to come by people baling up the large bales of hay and have those more readily available than you'll find farmers that have a stash of small square bales. And so how do you make this work if you don't have the equipment you need to move one of these big bales of hay around? So the ideal scenario is that you find a farm close by, cuts hay, makes round bales, and is willing to drop them off and deliver them to you, right? That's what we did. We have some neighbors that we've gotten to know. They cut hay, they have large round bales, and they bring them over to our property with their tractor, drop them off right where we need it here in the barn. It's been a great situation. If you don't have that option of somebody really close by that can deliver individual bales of hay to you, you might just need to get a little bit more creative then. There could still be options of getting a delivery of even a few bales at a time, storing them under tarps or a lean-to or in your barn or something like that, And the big thing is that once they're in place, if you don't have the equipment like a skid steer to move these things around, they're going to stay in place. So maybe you could even talk to, maybe there's another neighbor or somebody you know close by that has a skid steer, and every, you know, however many days or a couple times a month when you need to move one of these bales into place, maybe you could talk to them about borrowing a skid steer or something like that and seeing if you could work out some sort of arrangement. But there could still be other creative ways for you to make that work if there's a good option for round bales in your area. So I've found the easiest way to make these round bales work on a small scale, if you're just kind of moving hay by hand, is to, when you bring the bale in, to place it on its flat side facing down on the ground. And so you'll want, just like when you store any hay, you're going to want to put some pallets or something underneath the bale to keep it up off the ground, so you know it's not absorbing moisture from the ground, to keep it dry. But put it up, you know, on its side, and then when you initially get that bale of hay dropped off, it has some sort of like, it's like a plastic wrap mesh kind of around it. So there's two ways you could take that mesh off. You can either find the ending of it and just kind of, it's usually wrapped around like 3 or 4 times around the bale. So that's usually how I get that off, is just grab the end of it and just walk around, unpeeling that plastic mesh wrap from it to open up the bale. You could also just take a knife and kind of cut all the way up and down the bale on the side, and you know, just cut that mesh wrapper apart and pull it off that way. That's another way to do it. Both work. The other thing I'll mention is that if you have chickens that are going to be pecking kind of around your bale of hay where it's stored, sometimes the outside layers of the round bales can just kind of come loose and fall off, especially like when it's a fresh round bale and you've just pulled off that mesh plastic wrapper on the outside. Some of the outside layers are especially pretty loose and can just fall off like an avalanche and trap or smother your chickens. So I've had this happen a couple times. So just something to be aware of. If you do have some of those big flakes just peel off, I would check under them right away. I've discovered chickens that got trapped under there, and you know, you just don't want to find a dead chicken there a day or two later. So just check it right away. And so for actually feeding hay to your animals from these round bales, it's different than the small square bales. So right, the small square bales, you have flakes, it's kind of folded into square flakes that are compressed, and you just pull off however many of those flakes you need, give them to your animals, or you just bring a whole bale out there, cut it open, and give that to your animals. So with the round bales, it's rolled up instead. So your flakes are kind of just in one giant roll. So you're just going to kind of find a starting point and start unrolling those flakes or that roll of hay. And what I find easiest to do is to actually roll it back up as you're pulling the hay off of it. So you're kind of forming your own small roll of hay, and then to actually pull that roll off, or that portion of hay off, you want to actually pull it back in the same direction that you were just rolling from. You don't want to just pull it straight off or continue to kind of unroll the bale as you're pulling that off. But if you pull it kind of back in that same direction that you were rolling from, it releases and it doesn't continue to unroll the bale of hay, because sometimes those rolls can kind of just keep unraveling as you're pulling off hay, and then the large sections of the bale fall off and can make a big mess in your barn. But if you have a nice tightly packed round bale and you do, like I said, and pull it off in that same direction that you were unraveling it, then you should be able to just keep your bale kind of solid and intact. The other thing I found really helpful for feeding hay to your animals from these round bales is to have some sort of like hay wagon or cart. I just use this black plastic garden cart that you could probably see back there, and load that up with hay for my cows. I give them kind of a full load of that in the morning and in the evening, and that's been about the right quantity. If you have just a few smaller animals like goats or sheep, you might just be able to pull off a roll or a flake from your bale and just feed it to them by hand. But if you're going to be doing multiple of those, having that cart is really handy just to load that up, wheel that out to where you're dropping off hay for your animals and bring that out to them. And so we don't have any sort of hay feeder either that we use with our round bales. Like I said, I just take those carts or wagonfuls of hay out to our paddock, wherever you're overwintering your animals, and I dump that in a different spot in that area each day. And so that kind of helps preserve the pasture a bit, right? Because if you have a feeder, generally, your activity of your animals is going to be concentrated to that area, and they do a good amount of damage, and they'll kind of tear up and maybe ruin the pasture in that area over time. But I found if you could kind of just distribute it, load by load in different areas, it kind of helps minimize the damage that your animals do on your pasture. So that's how we manage these larger round bales of hay here on our 5-acre farm. And for you and your situation, it may still be best to get the small square bales, but don't be intimidated by these larger bales of hay. Check with your farmers and friends and neighbors nearby. See if there's a good option. It's likely going to be much more economical for you in the long run to get the larger bales of hay and figure out a situation to make that work for you. So hopefully this has been helpful. If you still have any questions or even tips of your own on how you make this work on your farm, drop those below. And thanks for stopping by the farmstead today, and we'll see you next time.